I'm Don Renfrew, and this talk is going to be called Eating Right or Stopping the Genius. I'm a radiologist, and this is a CT picture of a patient who is much, much too large. I think one issue that we have to face as physicians is we have not been doing as good a job as we can at helping people to control their weight. In fact, there's an epidemic of obesity in the United States, and as you can see by looking at these curves, this has been increasing over the last 30 to 40 years. Somewhere over 50% of people are now overweight or obese in the U.S. There are multiple theories about this. There are multiple remedies that have been proposed to attempt to reverse this trend, but so far, no dice. So what I'm going to do today is present you with a football analogy. And the football analogy is that you want to prevent a blowout. Your job as someone who has a body and does not want to become overweight or obese, or wants to reverse your being overweight or obese, is to prevent a blowout. Now, the opposing coach is a genius, and he'll do whatever he can to make you eat more than you should. He's crafty and he's cunning. He's perfectly willing to push up to and maybe even beyond the ethical limits. And he has an excellent team. He can defeat you by getting you to form and keep bad eating habits. So what you want to do is assume the job of the defensive coordinator, and your job is to prevent the genius from running up the score. You want to coach yourself into a better place. In this case, the score is your weight. Now, if you look at that chart, you can see what your height is, where your weight in pounds should be. You want to be in the white area, not the pink area. You want a BMI of 25 or less. And if you look around in the U.S. society and you look at yourself in a mirror and you look on the scale, you'll notice that there are not a lot of people that are at that goal weight. There's a lot of people that aren't at that goal weight. We live in what one patient has called a food toxic environment. We're eating in the United States, which is the location of the obesity epidemic, and we have to eat there every day of our lives. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is how to keep the opponent's offense in check. The presentation will show you the genius's playbook, and we'll review your playbook. We'll formulate a game-winning plan that will enable you to be successful at achieving or keeping a BMI of under 25. The first step is to understand the genius's playbook. How does he get you to eat when you don't need to? Well, the genius achieves this goal by exploiting what's been called the habit loop. Author Charles Duhigg explains the habit loop. You can't go wrong reading this entire best-selling book called The Power of Habit. I would recommend that you go to Charles Duhigg's website and play the clip, How to Break Habits, if you haven't already done that. It will give you an excellent introduction to the concept of habit and what it is that habits do that make you eat when you really shouldn't be eating. So hopefully you've gone off and looked at that entire video clip. It's about 3 minutes, and now you're back. And basically, as Duhigg says, the habit loop starts with a cue. That prompt results in a routine, and then that leads to a reward. Let's look at some cues that the genius exploits. One cue to eat is flavorful food. Look at that piece of chocolate cake. Doesn't that just make your mouth water? It's tremendous. Fried chicken, that looks delicious. One of these bad boys, how about all 3 of them? They all look pretty darn good. A hot fudge sundae would really hit the spot right about now. Before or after a couple of racks of ribs. And Christmas is always the best time of year for many reasons, and a box of chocolate's one of those reasons. So there are many flavorful foods. You get the idea. It's a powerful cue to eat. Are there other cues? Well, there are quite a few other cues. For many of us, maybe most of us, food remaining on the plate or even within reach is a powerful cue to eat. There may be large portions on your plate served at a restaurant. The same concept applies to buckets as well as plates. And it also applies to bags of chips. It also applies to drink remaining in the cup. So this is America. We got food and drink in huge portions served round the clock. These are cues to eat. Are there any other cues to eat? Well, one of the interesting things to point out here is that the obesity epidemic didn't happen overnight. As Americans became increasingly obese, they recognized they had a problem, and they decided to do something about it. They became very scientific. They looked at what food was made of. One way of analyzing it is to break it down into what's known as macronutrients, fat, carbohydrate, and protein. The thinking is that depending on the macro constituent, you might eat more or less, and therefore be able to have a better handle on your weight. So there's been multiple diets that have been designed to reduce weight. If you're in the low-fat school, you'll want to hold the number of calories from fat to a minimum. If you're in the low-carbohydrate school, that wasn't original, but was made most famous by Atkins, now goes by the name of Paleolithic or caveman diet. You want to eliminate as many carbohydrate calories as possible. And of course, there are various Goldilocks diets out there that tell us not to eliminate or minimize calories from this or that macro constituent or nutrient, but rather to get a diet, the diet proportions that are not too small, not too large, but just right. You know, the paradoxic thing about all of these is that dieters may end up eating candy bars because they think they're eating the right food. The genius, with the help of the food industry, manufactures foods that conform to the ideal in question: low to no fat, low to no carbohydrate, or the correct proportion of macronutrients. The consumer, you and me, then thinks, oh, this food is good for me. And the very presence of the food, a good food, an ideal food, just the food we should eat, becomes a cue to eat. Are there any other cues to eat? There are legion, and you probably have recognized in yourself other cues that would make you want to eat. I think my last category that I'm going to speak about is best summarized by a fellow worker who said, as she put it, I realized I was in trouble when of my 12 basic emotions, 9 of them caused me to eat. We all know that eating is capable of changing our mood. An emotion may be a powerful cue to eat in general, and to eat specific cues in particular. So we may eat to fulfill an emotional need. So what happens when we encounter any or all of these powerful cues to eat? Our response is to eat. We eat cake, chicken, hamburgers, sundaes, ribs, chocolates. In addition, we clean our plates, we empty our buckets, we finish our drinks and chips. We eat the right food, or maybe not the right food, until it's gone. And we continue to eat emotionally. Then what happens? As a result of this routine prompted by the cue, we are rewarded. There's the wonderful aroma, texture, and taste of flavorful food. There's the sensation that the plate's empty and now I can stop eating. We do the right thing by eating the right food or the wrong food. And our mood changes or not. Well, now you know at least part of the Genius's playbook. He gets us to eat by prompting us with the cues of flavorful food, portion size, the right food, or the wrong emotion. And we've got to give him his due. There's always a payoff, a reward. Each of these habit loops has some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, if you will. So that's the Genius's playbook. What about our defense? If his habits lead us to gain weight till our BMI is over 25, what can we do? What's in our repertoire? Are there any cues to stop eating? Well, there are many cues to stop eating, but before we go there, let's review one simple but straightforward concept. There are a lot of cues which don't lead us to stop eating. And cues which do not lead us to stop eating include the ones that persist even after you've eaten enough to maintain your BMI or to get to your BMI of 25. Flavorful food is not a cue to stop eating. It will still be flavorful after you've eaten enough. A large portion or food remaining on the plate for most of us, or stuff in food in the bucket or in the bag, food in the receptacle, cup, whatever, that's not a cue to stop eating. It's actually a cue to continue to eat. The right food is not a cue to stop eating. It's a cue to eat. And similarly, whatever emotion led you to eat, it's not a cue to stop eating. Okay, what about hunger? Is hunger an emotion? How do we respond to hunger? What is the deal with hunger? As this cartoon says, the novice asks the master, "Master, is there any special way to be disciplined in the Tao?" And the master says, "Yes, there is." And the novice says, "What is that?" And the master says, "When you're hungry, eat, and when you're tired, sleep." Now, let's look at these foods. Is what you feel hunger? Think about the smell of frying bacon. Is what you feel hunger? In fact, most people, it's been shown, if you need the scientific proof, or you can just look at your own eating habits, but it's been shown that people do not stop eating simply because they're no longer hungry. Little kids do, as is noted in this excellent book by Brian Wansek, but most adults don't. Some adults do, but most adults don't. Adults tend to just eat until it's gone. There's another problem, and that is Wansek also notes the following. Many research studies show that it takes up to 20 minutes for our body and brain to signal satiation. In other words, you have to wait a while after you eat for hunger to go away. But as Wansek says, here's the problem. We start, finish, and clear the plate, clear the table, done with the meal, in way less than 20 minutes. As a matter of fact, 20 minutes is plenty of time. 5 minutes is plenty of time to eat 2 or 3 pieces of pizza and chug a large refill of Pepsi, which would give you enough calories for the whole day. So what happens is, really, most of us figure out how much we want to eat before we put any food into our mouths, and then we eyeball out how much we think we want and dish it out, and then eat till that's gone. And if something else is close, we eat that. And if something else isn't that far away, we eat that. And if our kid has left a little bit on his plate, we might eat that too. I guess it's just as very important for you to put on your plate the right amount of food. So noting that, what are some cues to stop eating? Well, Wansek has some good things to say about this, and one of the things he says is we don't know. We don't really know what makes us stop eating, but it does seem to be a combination of things. Here's a few of those things. How much we chew. If you take a piece of beef jerky and say, okay, go ahead, eat as much of that as you want to, and you take, on another day, a plate full of Kobe beefsteak that melts in your mouth and you can cut with a fork, you're going to eat more of the Kobe steak, all things being equal. You can imagine yourself how many apples you would chew your way through versus how much applesauce you would eat, how much of that salad you would eat versus how much of that smoothie, which is probably sized about correctly and probably has twice as many calories as a salad. In addition to how much we chew, how much we swallow will determine how much we eat. At some level, the brain thinks of how much volume of food we have gone through in a meal, and I'll return to this concept later. Another cue to stop eating is how much we've thought about what we've eaten so far. One way to kind of think through this particular issue is to imagine the following. Suppose you had a bowl of popcorn and you ate one piece at a time very slowly and paid attention to every bite. Now imagine the usual method where we all eat popcorn. Then it's really not hard to see who's behind movie popcorn. How long we've been eating is another cue. The longer we've been eating, the more likely we are to stop. There's this really cool set of cutlery from My Diet Dinnerware, which has a timer on it, and it makes you slow down eating. Kind of gets back to that 20 minutes idea again. So cues to stop eating include, these are not all the cues, but these the cues include how much we chew, how much we swallow, how much we think about food, and how much time we spend eating. So that's step 2. So now let's come up with a game plan. We're making rules, we're formulating a game plan. We've gotten a peek at the Geniuses playbook, we've got our own playbook, and what we can do in response to those plays, and we're ready to formulate a game plan. We'll base our game plan on knowledge of what the genius uses us to get us to eat too much, and his exploitation, that is, his exploitation of our bad habits. And we'll make use of what we know about cues to stop eating to keep him from running up the score. But let me tell you something, this isn't a gimme. If you're going to win this game, you need an impeccable game plan, you need excellent execution, and you might even need a little luck. But you do have to have an opportunity to compete. So first of all, we'll need some rules. This is kind of the bad news. We need to make some prescriptive rules. Humans work best using black and white rules. It removes stress from our brains and minimizes the need for willpower. We'll talk a little bit more about willpower in a bit, but let's look at the negative rules regarding eating, phrased as the 10 Commandments are in a typically negative fashion. We'll kind of return to the 10 Commandments in a while, and there's a reason I'm bringing those in addition to, they're always good to bring in for every reason. At any rate, let's formulate some commandments. Let's not eat flavorful food for flavor alone. Flavorful food is delicious. It's one of God's gifts to us. We really enjoy flavorful food. We should enjoy flavorful food. What I'm saying is not to not enjoy flavorful food. What I'm saying is don't eat flavorful food simply for flavor. If you're overweight and that leads you to consume more food than you really should be consuming, just be cognizant of the fact that even after you've eaten enough, flavorful food still tastes good. Enjoy your food, but don't eat it simply for flavor. As far as the portion size goes, we should eat when we're hungry. We should stop eating when we're full. And this would mean that we'd likely leave food on our plate or fluid in the glass. But as Wansik says, this isn't what happened. We clean the plate. If we're eating family style, we bring in seconds from the serving platter only a few inches away from our plate. If we're eating with children, we finish up what they don't eat. If we're George Costanza, we ease the eclair off the top of the trash. You get the picture. The idea here is to serve yourself one correct portion and stop. It's probably easiest to do that if you go through the whole mental mechanism of thinking about that before you start to eat. But what is a correct portion? And how do you know what it is? Well, that's something you do have to learn if you don't already know that, and we'll go through a few kind of key examples here. I think one thing that's pretty safe to say is you really don't want to eat a food simply because it's the right food. I mean, this is even worse in a way than eating a food because it's flavorful. I mean, here you're not even hungry and you may not even be enjoying it anymore, but you're eating it because it's the right food. I'm stuffed, but I'm on an Atkins diet, so I'm going to have one more hamburger. You know, eating food in that manner may feel you virtuous, but it's absurd. So what you should do is go to the kitchen cupboard and pantry and throw out any candy bars that have been mislabeled as health food. I think Michael Pollan makes a good point when he says that if something has a label on it that proclaims a health benefit, it's probably best to avoid that item. Real health foods are humble and they don't advertise. As far as emotional eating goes, I think you could talk for an hour or more on that alone. I will say that it's a tough issue to address, and maybe one of the best single methods of dealing with it is hypnotism. And in that regard, you can hire a professional hypnotist or go to class, or you can get online apps for $3, which you plug in the headphones and listen to it once or twice a day or once or twice a week, however long it takes you to kind of get the picture, get your brain reoriented around that. Otherwise, hopefully, just knowing that you shouldn't eat or engage in emotional eating should be enough. Okay, so we got some food proscriptions. Don't eat for flavor alone. Don't eat too large a portion. Don't eat simply because it's the right food. Don't engage in emotional eating. Okay, so there's also some authorizations in that famous list of 10 things that we're supposed to do and not do. I've got some authorizations for food too. I think get most of your nutrition from low-calorie density foods. Okay, what's a low-calorie density food, and why should I get most of my nutrition from them? Well, here's another book that I unequivocally recommend. As a matter of fact, if I had a magic wish, I would say if I could eliminate every other diet book that's ever been created and replace it with this book, I would do that. The fundamental observation that Rolls makes, she's a research scientist, it's impeccable research. The number one observation she makes is that over the course of a day or two, a person eats about the same weight/volume of food. And typical diet books of the kind we have been talking about promote one macronutrient at the cost of another macronutrient. What Rolls said is that's all, poor thinking. That basically what you want to do is increase the volume of food that you eat without increasing the calories, so you'll feel full. How does that work? Well, a calorie-dense food is one with more than 1 calorie per gram in her book. But how can you have a food like that? Because protein, carbohydrate, and fat all have multiple calories per gram. Well, the only way for that to happen is for the food to be comprised of predominantly water or fiber rather than one of those other macronutrients. So let's just look at this 1575 calorie meal and notice that chips, pastry, hamburgers, fries, they're all things that are very densely caloric. They're a high calorie density. This kind of food, fruit, whole wheat bread, vegetables, soups, they're all very low caloric density. So again, if you compare those two things, you'll see that they're vastly different in volume. Now, think back. What were our cues to stop eating? What meal would make you chew more? Which one would make you swallow more? Which one would make you think more about food? Which one would take longer to eat? It really isn't even close. I mean, this low-calorie density stuff is golden. Now, don't immediately think, oh, low-calorie density, it's the right food. I'm going to eat it just because it's the right food. You don't want to fall into that trap either. But what you want to realize is an excellent way to modify your diet so that it's healthier and so that you feel full on a reasonable amount of delicious food is to just identify low-calorie density foods and eat those. Okay. Most food in the produce aisle is going to be low-calorie density. Almost all vegetables, avocado's an exception. Almost all fruits, dates are an exception, are going to be low calorie density. So if you pick most of your food from the produce aisle, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Simple rule of thumb is if you can take something and rinse it under cold running water and eat it and have it be pretty good without any cooking, that's probably a low calorie density food. Now once you wander into the middle of the store, it can be a jungle, and you do need a couple of rules or some way to negotiate that jungle. But here's the deal. The nutrition labels are great. They tell you what's in it, they tell you the macronutrients, and they tell you vitamins and so forth. But you really don't need to get that far down to figure out this whole calorie density thing. You just take the serving size, how many grams is that? You take the calories and you divide the calories by the serving size. And if it's less than 1, you're talking about a low calorie density food, and that's good. The right foods that we were talking about before, the pseudo candy bars, the candy bars, they're all high calorie density foods. Most foods in American cuisine are high calorie density foods, especially the ones we think of as delicious or intensely flavorful. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's kind of the way it is. All right, there's a couple of ways to follow rule number 1 and to get the most of your nutrition from low calorie density foods, and we'll kind of briefly review those two. One of which is, this is easier and more straightforward and probably healthier, and it's just eat foods that are only low calorie density, or nearly exclusively only those foods. That's a very easy thing to do. In one way, it's a simple rule to follow. It's very healthy and nutritious, and you'll feel full. Another method is, if you want to have high calorie density foods, and I'm not saying don't, fried chicken's delicious, chocolate's delicious, that's okay. But if you're going to follow rule number 1, then you got to balance out the high calorie density stuff with some low calorie density stuff. So let's say we got a cookie. We're going to have one of these cookies. Fiber is good for you, so this is new and it's got fiber, so it must be good for us. So we'll have a cookie. And looking at the calorie, we got 90 calories. Okay. So that's for 25 grams. So that's 3.6 grams a calorie. So how do we balance out the cookie with broccoli? If we wanted 90 calories of broccoli, that'd be 9 ounces of broccoli. So to balance a cookie and maintain rule number 1, we'd have to eat 9 ounces of broccoli. 4 cookies would be 2 pounds of broccoli. It's getting to sound like a lot of broccoli. Okay, let's have a slice of pizza. This is a pizza, meat lovers pizza. Protein's good, right? Yeah. So let's balance the pizza with a garden salad. No salad dressing, just the lettuce, cucumbers, and tomatoes. So to get as many calories out of a garden salad, that's like 4 pounds of salad. So I guess the moral is you got to be really careful when you're eating high calorie density foods if you're going to try to adhere to rule number 1 there. Okay. Do we have any other positive rules, so to speak? Eat consciously. How much we think about food, the more we think, the sooner we'll stop eating, typically. You don't really think about food when you're sitting in the theater with the popcorn on your lap and the oversized drink in the cup holder and the bag of Skittles in the other cup holder, watching a CG movie. You can't really think about your food while you're watching your football team while the genius racks up the score on you. So you can't think about your food too well when you're listening to talk radio about the Republicans. It's just hard to do that. So I think probably the more attention you pay, the more you're going to eat consciously, the better off you are. Eating slowly is tough. Those dinnerware things with the timers on them help. But as Wansik says, that's not America. As a rule, we eat, clean up, prepare, eat, and clean up in 5 minutes. So think about it. I think this is probably as important as rule number 1. If you can just get your proportions right, if you serve yourself that and then walk away, no family style, no seconds, no eclair from the trash. Eat your meal and wait 20 minutes before you decide whether you want seconds or dessert. And typically, whatever is causing you to eat, call it hunger, call it what you will have gone away in that 20 minutes. And you'll not need to take those extra calories. Okay. Another way to have more margin for error in all of this is to eat the low-calorie density foods. That handful of broccoli is 10 calories at the most. I mean, if you err by that much, by an ounce of broccoli, who cares? You know, that's like a fraction of a percent of what you burn up in a day. If you make an error dosing on macadamia nuts, suddenly you're looking at 10% of your daily need for just a couple of little nuts like that. So, another good reason to stick with low-calorie density foods. So, food authorizations, get most of your nutrition from low-calorie density foods. Eat consciously, slowly, serve yourself a correct meal, wait 20 minutes. So let's summarize so far. What do we got? What have we learned? What have we learned? Okay, we've got the genius. He exploits the habit loop. He entices you to eat more food than you need. He uses a variety of cues: flavorful food, portion size, the right food, stress, others you can think of, to get you to eat. And none of those will lead you to stop eating. They'll just lead you to eat more than you need. However, we now know our playbook. We know what our eating commandments are. Don't eat just because it's flavorful. Don't eat too much. Don't eat simply because it's the right food. Don't eat because it's an emotion causing you to eat. Focus on those low-calorie density foods. Eat consciously and slowly, and portion yourself appropriately. Now, what I'm going to say is, all this is known and published. Why do we continue to fail? All of it is known and published. Now, if you have not personally read these 3 books, I can't recommend them highly enough. Volumetrics I already spoke of. Once a book is excellent, entertaining, The Power of Habit. Not really a diet book at all, more a book on psychology, and it has a lot of other interesting insights into American business. But it's highly recommended. I would definitely, without equivocation, recommend reading all 3 of those. However, you can read all 3 of those books and have your kind of plan set up, and you can still fail. Now, why is that? How is that? Well, a game plan is only one part of the solution. You've got to execute. Let's introduce one more book, another book that I would highly recommend. Very entertaining, very interesting. It's called Predictably Irrational, and it has to do with how people don't always do the right thing economically. Sometimes they do kind of the wrong thing economically, but the right thing psychologically for them. The book looked at that in a number of contexts, but I'm going to review one part of a chapter in there, and then how that relates to us. So the chapter talks about an experiment run on undergraduate students at UCLA. It was later run on some similar experiments were run on undergraduate students and graduate students at MIT and Harvard Business. So the students had a total of 5 minutes to solve as many of these problems as they could. You got to pick out 2 of those numbers that add up to exactly 10. Now, here's the deal. The students didn't know that they were being graded in a certain fashion. They were being graded in a fashion that wouldn't allow cheating, and then they were being graded a separate set of students at a separate occasion, graded so that they could cheat. When no cheating was possible, the students averaged about 3.1 problems in 5 minutes. When cheating was possible, they averaged 4.1 problems. Cheating occurred, despite the fact that all these students were high performing, and whatever else you want to say about them on the basis of where they were in life. The fact is that they did cheat. Now, before the test, they were told, another group was told, write down the names of 10 books that you read in high school. And after writing down those book titles, the students averaged 4.1 problems in 5 minutes. In other words, cheating still occurred. Now, another time, the students were told, write down as many of the 10 commandments as you can remember. Cheating stopped. Another time, they put their signature under the statement, I understand that this study falls under the MIT honor system. Of course, in formal terms, there is no MIT honor system. But signing the statement stopped cheating. The students all knew cheating was wrong. Apparently, they just forgot their game book. How do we remember our game plan? As Christian apologist C.S. Lewis put it, we need to be continually reminded of what we believe. He was speaking specifically of Christianity, but he said neither Christianity nor any other belief will automatically remain alive in the mind. It must be fed. So here's a couple of solutions to the problem. A low-tech solution is before eating, write down as many of those food commandments as you can, or you could make up a statement. I agree to eat by my MIT honor system food commands, and sign that. Here's a high-tech solution. Before eating, review the food commandments at our website or on SlideShare.net. Our website's calibratemybrain.com. Now, this is an example of what you'll see there. The slides will vary in the wording and they'll vary in the image, but they all kind of contain the same idea. They'll first show you the eating commandments again, so you can look at those, and then they'll illustrate each of the commandments. So once more, to reiterate, a great game plan is only part of the solution. You have to execute. Hopefully, what I've given you today will help you do that. Thank you very much.